I really was struggling with an insecurity that I had. Like, how are they going to find out that I didn't, I don't have a degree? My job, I was let go and I was heartbroken. I did not see it coming. We are not who we were in the past. You can be a different person. And sometimes we get so tripped up in ourselves and think, how would we ever be better? But God forgives and He provides a way to be. I'm no longer the Melissa I was 30 years ago, and I'm not a perfect Melissa either, even though I'm a Christian.
Hey, are you feeling a little bit lonely right now? Maybe isolated, maybe a little bit disconnected. Maybe you found yourself out of work from the job that you loved. Maybe you invested a decade or more in that place. And now you're thinking, nobody knows me. I feel a little bit unseen, even though I put all this effort in. Well, look, I have an amazing guest for you today. Melissa Georgeoff is with us, and I want you to stick around because we're going to teach you how to embrace your faith, find your passion, maybe follow your purpose. Maybe we'll figure out the definition of those things, but make sure that you end up with an amazing career on the back of this. I'd like to welcome up Melissa Georgeoff. Melissa, how are you today? Pleased to see you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, James. How are you this morning? Thank you for having me.
I am absolutely wonderful. I'm better for having you. We had a little time in the green room together. I'm super excited to find out more about all the things you've been doing over the last 3-4 decades, because there's an awful lot to pack in here. But if you're watching this, I can guarantee you the output for you is going to be great. So grab a pen and paper. Make notes on what we say. Save this recording somewhere so that you can come and see Melissa over and over because she's going to share some wisdom with us. Melissa, where are you from? Where are you living right now? Let's dive in there.
Well, James, I live in a very small town called Bethalto, Illinois. I'm about 35 minutes from St. Louis, Missouri, right across the river.
Awesome. So anyone in the US will know that. If you're not in the US, it's in the middle.
That's right. It's about 4 hours south of Chicago. So everyone thinks, Illinois, we're Chicago, but no, we're more like St. Louis, Missouri.
All right. So one of the things we talked about, I want to jump in on this one, is you had this incredible podcast for yourself. And I know you're on my show right now, but it's called See the Unseen. Perhaps tell us a little bit about that, because then people get to know a little bit about your mission and how you're helping others, and maybe share some of the stories that are from there.
Yeah. So James, I started a podcast in the summer because I had lost my job after 30 years with the same company. And I was advocating for people with disabilities, and I was devastated. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had taken a new job, but I still felt like I had a calling to continue to help people with disabilities, especially those who need complex wheelchairs. And I had taken a job with a ventilator company. So think about, patients who have ALS who are really struggling and need the equipment. So I thought, what's another way for me to keep advocating and doing what I love and doing what I'm passionate about? Because work had really been my entire life. I had spent 30 years traveling and had the stress of the corporate job. And so I thought, what can I do that's kind of a little bit fun? But I can hit on all my passions. And my daughter told me, well, Mom, why don't you just do something fun? Like, you've done a keynote, do the podcast. And I said, but I got to do something because it has to mean something, or I had to make money at it. There's got to be a reason, right? And she said, there doesn't need to be a reason. Just do something that's fun. So I started the podcast, and it was really to bring visibility to people who I feel like deserve the spotlight. So a couple things. It was, number one, to keep advocating for people with disabilities. Number two, I'll explain my career here in a minute, but it's really to help young people grow in their career, knowing that no matter where you come from, no matter your background, whether you have a degree or not, you can be successful too. And I'm very passionate about helping young people grow their career. And then also, I'm friends with some singer-songwriters who have written in Nashville, who have written for Carrie Underwood, Luke Bryan, just to name a few. And they have such incredible stories that are behind the songs, and nobody even knows who they are. And I think it's just, people need to know more about who are these people who are so talented that are writing these songs. And so I've had a few of those kind of guests on. And then also I wanted to share my faith on the podcast. Really just started doing it and have had incredible guests. I've had, my first guest was Tommy Carlos, who's written for Montgomery Gentry, #1 hits. He's a singer-songwriter in Nashville. So I did a podcast with him, done podcast with a guy with no arms and no legs who's a cornhole champion. Dayton Weber is his name. Sarah Hartwig, who's from Nashville. She is blind. She plays the guitar. She's sung with Low Cash and Lauren Elena. Those are just to name a few. So I'm really passionate about the podcast. I'm still, I have a full-time job. And so I do the podcast kind of on the side and for fun and to continue to bring visibility for people who deserve it.
It's beautiful. And I love it. As somebody, I host 3 different shows. I just love that you have one that's you're doing for fun, but you're making such a massive difference to those people's lives, giving them a platform to be seen. And I think that's wonderful. So people can explore their lives, understand a little bit about who they are. But most importantly, when you do this, like I'm doing this now with you, one of us is going to connect with somebody. And we talked about that isolation and loneliness, and you talked about some of the markets you've served and the things that you're passionate about serving with people with disabilities. We talked about Black and brown women earlier before we came onto the show. Having diversity and inclusion as part of your theme is vital. But then the faith piece and kind of your relationship with your God, I just think that is marvelous to give somebody a place where they can come. Because I know, and you probably knew as well, when we come to the end of a job, or a career where we thought we might stay longer, we don't know who to ask. We don't know who to turn to. But now you have a platform where those people can find you. So I think that's wonderful. Now, you did mention at the beginning, so maybe we transfer there. You did talk about you were in a job for 30 years and then you found yourself out of a job. So I've got 2 questions. Part A is, tell us a little bit about that journey. What are your skill sets? What did you do in the 30-year career? And then I think what most people would want to hear right now, given some of the heat and intensity in the market, is how did you find that new job? So let's start with the 30-year career, and then we'll talk a little bit about the new job and your approach to that and finding the job with the ventilator company.
Well, James, I started back 31 years ago by answering an ad in the paper. So I'm really dating myself here. But I went in for a job that was really answering the phones. It was an administrative assistant to the CEO of the company. So I started doing that, and I learned the business from him, just spending every single day with him. And that just kind of grew. I started getting into customer service, processing orders for it was a complex wheelchair company. And then I did sales and marketing, and I got into IT a little bit. And then I did quality improvement, where I went and audited a bunch of different of our locations so we could be accredited. And then I got into what they call payer contracting. And this was negotiating with health plans. And I didn't know the first thing about it. So a woman told me one day that, hey, you're going to be our, I think she said, a director of payer contracting. And I said, well, what the heck is that? And she says, oh, you'll figure it out. And so it really wasn't until that woman I thought, wow, somebody really believes that I can do this. And I had no real previous experience with it. So I just started going out, meeting with people. I read a lot of books. I went to Tony Robbins courses on how to talk to anyone, how to develop relationships. I started meeting with health plans. I remember they'd say, do you want to be part of our HMO, PPO plan? Yeah, all those. I had no idea what I was talking about. But, along the way, I met a lot of these customers that needed complex wheelchairs. So these are people like Christopher Reeve, people like Steve Gleason, who live in their complex wheelchair. So they're very customized to the individual. Headrests, laterals, hip guides. They can drive their wheelchairs with their eyes, with their tongue, with their head. I mean, it's just fantastic. And so I met them, and it really pulled at my heartstrings. I said, I don't know the first thing about getting these contracts, but what I do know is that I can go and be a voice for these people that can't get out of their home. They can't call health plans. They can't tell people what they need. And so I knew that I could do this. And so that was really me just sharing their stories with health plans and, helping them understand the challenges that they face and why it's so important to have the right reimbursement so that these people can get the technology they needed. Just over the years, I developed a team. We started to grow. And so I couldn't do it myself. So I had to start to, develop other people. And I led a team of credentialing, what they call credentialing, and then payer profile team and payer contracting. And then I started to get into what they call Medicaid affairs. And that was really every state Medicaid program around the country has different reimbursement and different policies and procedures. And so I started going out, meeting with them. I started working with lobbyists that we hired to get legislation passed or work with them individually in 47 states to make sure that they had the appropriate reimbursement for people with disabilities. So I'm not a lobbyist, or not yet. And I have just spent my career just trying to share their stories so that, we can do the right thing for people with disabilities. So yeah, I mean, that's,
Yeah, I mean, you said there at the end that you're not a lobbyist, but you are for humanity. That managed care and some of the things you've done in that 30-year cycle. I mean, I want to ask you, if you were there 30 years ago, do you remember what the revenue was 30 years ago?
Oh, I do. We started with 5 million in revenue and we were in 2 states and 2 locations. And we grew it to over 850 million in revenue in 47 states, about 150 locations.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal journey and company serving humanity in the way that it does, and I think that's really really impressive. It really comes across to me your focus on health, your focus on diversity, inclusion, disabilities. That really is a strong message in there. And so when we tie that to your faith, we tied that to what you got passionate about in there. This is the advocacy that you bring into the marketplace, and so that's a powerful journey of customer care and sales and marketing and contracting, all those things that you got skills in. I really warm to the story because I'm a big advocate of people increasing their value by learning more skills. And you went in there and invested in yourself and did a ton of that work. And then you have this heartbreaking news. You're not going to be there after 29, 30 years and you have to find another job. So perhaps tell us, when you leave in emotion and you move on to the next thing, what's the path for you? How easy was it to find yourself in another role? And tell us a little bit about that. Because I know there's a lot of people right now feeling the angst of not finding the next thing for them.
Well, my job was eliminated after about 30 years. And so they had, they had let about 40 other people go. And unfortunately, I was part of that. I had empowered my way up to, leading a team, and they had people to do that. And so, yeah, my job, I was let go and I was heartbroken. I did not see it coming. I then was under what they call a non-compete and a non-solicit agreement. So even though they let me go, I had a severance, and I thought, well, you know what? I have worked for 30 years traveling, pretty stressed out, pretty burnout. And so I thought, I'll never get this time back until it's time to retire. And so my daughter was just getting ready to have a baby, and my son was getting ready to graduate college. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take some time off. And I listened to some really great advice, from different people that I had worked with over the years that were senior leaders. And they had said, think about the 3 things that you're really good at and, what you're passionate about. And so I did. And they also said, take some time off and just really relax, and which was really hard for me to do. But I did enjoy, I planned a baby shower for my daughter. My son graduated college. I just really slowed down. And really, that's when I think that I got more involved also with my faith, because I was pretty lonely. I'm not going to lie. There were all these people in my industry. I was very well known in my industry. I would say that I was, we were the largest complex wheelchair company in the country. And I was probably, I was at the top of what I did. And so all these people in health plans, all these people in my industry, I knew and I loved, and they became family. Like my senior leadership team was family to me, and they were just gone. And it's interesting, the people that you think you will hear from, you don't always hear from. And then the people that that you don't think you'll ever hear from, all of a sudden they call you and they say, you know what, I'm thinking about you, and, I'm sorry for what happened. And I think there are people that are just uncomfortable. They don't know if they should approach you or not approach you. So for me, it was very lonely. I live about 6 minutes out of town, and everybody teases me. I say this is the country, but because I want to be in town, but I felt very isolated. I work from home. I know a lot of people work from home now, and I'm so social and I'm such an extrovert that I thought, what am I going to do? I did get approached by one of our biggest competitors, and I felt like, I entertained it a bit, and there's a lot of complications with, non-competes, and I had to wait, and I thought about going there. And then I thought, I spent my whole blood, sweat, and tears career building my company up. I looked at it, my company, and
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know that I want to do that. And so I had another company that was a ventilator company, and they reached out to me, and they were, they were very excited and wanted me to come on board. And so I really thought about it, and I thought, well, I can still advocate for people with disabilities who have people who have ALS who need ventilators. And so it was a contracting role. It wasn't leading a team. I thought, well, can I go back to being an individual contributor, because I've led teams now? But I always enjoyed doing the hard work. And so I took that job, and here I am a year later into a company called Respire Home Care Services. And they take care of people who need life-sustaining ventilators, and for infants and adults. Yeah, it was hard to make a transition, and I think what's really been a blessing for me too is that this employer has allowed me to really just have balance in my life, which I never had. Be able to do a podcast, be able to do the work, and sometimes I speak, and they have been really supportive of all the things that I've wanted to do. So for there, I think it's a real blessing.
You said so many things. I made some notes through that. And so I'd like to go, I'm going to go one level deep on some of those things that you said, because I think there's lessons in that for everybody. And somebody heard what they needed to hear today just in that piece. So if you're wondering what just happened, rewind that piece. 2 or 3 minutes, just go back and listen to that story of what happens when you leave a company you've been with a long time, and how do you move to the next level. So I'm going to go through some of the things you said. First one you said was you took time off. And yes, there was a non-compete, but actually not just you, but your family, you acknowledged, it would be good just to take a breather and slow down. So tell us a little bit more about that. You shared the wonderful news about your daughter and baby shower, but tell us about that slowing down process and what was easy about it, and what did you find a little bit difficult?
I have now known that I am a workaholic, or I was a workaholic.
Good admission,
I Yeah, I mean, I was on a great mission. And so for me, it was just something I knew I had to do. And it's funny because the night before I was let go, I told my husband, fiance at that time, that they're going to have to, he said, do you ever worry about losing your job? And I said, you know what? I said, I'm never going to give up on these people. And I said, they will literally have to fire me before I will ever quit these people with disabilities. And it was weird because the next morning I got fired. And so slowing down for me was like, okay, because I kept, our human nature, we just want to think, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next? I got to find another job, got to get on LinkedIn, got to get a resume together, and do all this stuff. But I really took that time to just pray about it. And I went to church, I'm active in my church. And so I really spent a lot of time praying for peace, for comfort, for wisdom, for knowledge. And, and God, was always giving me, well, this might work out, this could work out, opening these different doors, closing different doors. And so, it allowed me to, think about, how do I throw a baby shower? I did that, which was something fun. And I didn't have to stress out about traveling or where I was going to be. And I just made the most beautiful baby shower for my daughter. And then actually the women who did these beautiful balloon bouquets, they started their own business out of their garage or out of their basement. And they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars now. I had them on my podcast. Let's see, I went to my son's graduation, like I said, and just really enjoyed it. Really was present in the moment where, when you're working and you're so burnt out in corporate, sometimes you're always thinking about work, you're always thinking about something else. And I just stopped that. And I really just asked for God to allow me to be present in every single day life. And then my daughter had a grandbaby, and it was the most beautiful thing that ever happened in my whole life. I mean, besides having my kids and, having a grandbaby, I became a grandma for the first time, and I got to just spend time with him. If she needed me, I got to go to her house. I held him, and I just didn't have to worry about traveling or being anywhere or anything. And so, there's reasons. Everything happens, right, for a reason. And in the moment, we don't know what that reason is, and we want to, even now, move forward and try and think of what is it that we're going to do next. But God knows that what we needed in the time that we need it. And I needed just to be able to enjoy that grandbaby, which that's really kind of how I navigated through a very hard time in the quiet. And I also went and started networking with people that I had not talked to for a long time. And I asked them questions like, what am I good at? What do you think I'm good at? And so a lot of people would tell me, you're great at developing relationships, you're great at advocating for people, you're good at negotiating, so I remembered those things and held on to those things of like, because as you're gone and as you're not working, sometimes it's almost like the devil can get in your head, and you can start getting the negative self-talk, like, what did I do for 30 years, or like, what am I good at? And so I would reflect back on what did people say about me, what's the legacy I want to leave on this world. And yeah, you know what? I did an exclusive agreement with United Healthcare for 3 years. I forgot about that, or, oh, I negotiated 2,000 payer contracts in 47 states. I led a team. I mentored 600 women from the Women's Network and Emotion. So I started remembering all the things that I had done and how God, always got me through all of those things too, when I knew that I could not do it on my own. Like, I'm a small town country girl from Bethalto. God somehow always got me through those difficult times.
The powerful message I'm hearing there is, in your moments of loneliness and isolation, you found faith to seek your peace and wisdom and comfort. You said that in the beginning. And then what I heard in the kind of second half of everything you said there is, through the baby shower, the graduation, you started networking, you started to notice that the thing that made you feel belonging was this connection to people that you hadn't spoken to in a long time, who were actually bringing you value. And so they were able to give you insights and perspectives and things, and have conversations that you'd been missing because you'd been in the fast lane doing the thing. And yeah, I tell people this, you say, there's a kind of big circle of life, and let's say that's 700,000 hours on average. Work is like 90,000 hours of that. You're going to work 12 to 13% of your life. But people think we work a lot more. You actually don't. You really don't work much of your life at all. So yeah, spend time on life. I love that. Hey, this is James. I'm jumping in the middle of the video here because I want to let you know that there's an opportunity by clicking the link in the description underneath this video to meet me for 30 minutes. In that meeting, I will give you 2 or 3 strategies, or 2 to 3 big ideas that will change your career, your mission, your business, and maybe even your life, if you'll commit to acting on those things. Now, I want to let you know, I'm not there to sell you anything. I don't have anything to sell you, but I do want to have a conversation with you so you can get into momentum and start to execute against your priority activities. You shared earlier, and I'm digging deeper a little bit on something else that I heard in there. You did mention Tony Robbins, but we don't necessarily have to promote Tony. I think he's doing a really good job by himself. But you did say something around mentors and coaches, and finding out a little bit about the top 3 or 4 things that you are either gifted, talented, most skilled at, have a preferred interest in. Tell us a little bit about that process, and what did you uncover about yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always known that first of all, I was very shy when I was very, very young. And then, I was a little more outgoing. I was in cheerleading and things like that. But I did not, because of my background, I didn't come from money. And I kind of grew up poor. I always say, when it rained, I used to get like 5 buckets out and the roof would leak. I thought everybody did that. But then I realized that, my mom she worked at a ceramic shop, and she would save every dollar she had in order to really sew me these beautiful gowns that, people were spending $300,000 and $400,000 on. My mom's, sewed until 3:30 in the morning, and so I could have. So I didn't feel like I was doing without necessarily, but I knew that I didn't come from money. And that's why too, all the rich kids, they went to college. And so I could only afford a couple of years that I paid for myself. So I did not graduate with a degree. So to me, that was always an insecurity growing up. And even throughout my whole career, I was working with, as you grow in your career, you're working with people that are just, really smart and had come from these Ivy League schools. And when I was at Emotion, I was working with, a lot of guys that had come from GE, and they had the Jack Welch leadership training, and but they didn't know anything about wheelchairs. And so they came over, and I really was struggling with an insecurity that I had. Like, how are they going to find out that I didn't, I don't have a degree? And so it was like coming out in kind of a bad way, because sometimes when you're insecure about something, it's like, you're very sensitive about things and you got to fight, for everything. And I don't know, maybe that's why I was successful all those years, because maybe I felt like I had to prove something. But eventually I ended up working, our CEO invested in a leadership coach for me. And his name is Tavo Gottfredson. He coaches CEOs and CFOs. He's written a book, and he's just an amazing person. And so I spent a year and a half with him, and I learned to overcome the insecurity that I had. He literally asked me, Melissa, what's the most insecure, thing that you really struggle with? And I literally didn't even want to tell my leadership coach. And I said, Tavo, I don't even want to share this with you. But he's like, come on, Melissa, just share it. So I tell him that, I didn't graduate college. And he said, and I think a lot of women struggle with like imposter syndrome and things like that. I think that's where I was really struggling with. It's like, they're going to find out and they're not going to think I'm smart enough to do this job or something. And he said, well, do you want to go back to college? And I said, no. He said, do you think it's going to help you make more money? I said, no. And he said, well, what's another story you can tell yourself? And I said, well, that I have 30 years of domain expertise that these guys will never have. And he said, well, then why don't you start telling yourself that story? And it was literally life-changing for me. I know that sounds crazy, but one guy just telling me like, it's okay and move on. And he helped me to find balance in my life. I started putting goals out there of like, how can I be a better mom? And and I wanted to go on a mission trip. And so I put that down, and I wanted to bring national recognition for people with disabilities. So I started making all these goals, and he really just, I started changing the way I acted in meetings, instead of telling people what to do, saying things like, we should do this, or, we should do that. I said, what would you think if we did this? It was just like those little simple approaches that were just life-changing. And so for me, James, to answer your question, and this is a long-winded way to get to it, but it was really that I never had a mentor really or coach except for the CEO that I worked for, that I was an assistant. I learned the business that way. The woman who literally just made a moment like, you're going to be our director of payer contracting, and believed in me. And so I thought, okay. But along the way, I never had anybody to look up to. I never had anybody to go to. And I think for me, that was really important, because I think a lot of women don't have mentors or coaches. And so that's why I wanted to help women and men, young people in business, to know that they're not alone, and that's why I think about even with people with disabilities. I feel like they're the most discriminated people in the country. And so if I can figure out and help bring visibility to people who don't feel seen, don't feel heard, women don't feel heard in business, that's really my only goal, is how do I help other people this way?
It's so good. I mean, on the topic of degrees, it doesn't hurt Richard Branson or Ellen DeGeneres or Larry Ellison that they don't have a degree. They've done okay. And you're just another example of somebody, and I say this to people who are very close to me. We talked in the green room about that, is that is not who you are, that you don't have that label or you don't have that qualification. There's too many people out there who are evidence that you don't need it if you're going to go and get the expertise, the skills, and deliver the value elsewhere. So I think that's really, really good. It sounds like that having those relationships with a few important individuals led you to this path where, you have that phrase, your mess is your message. And, you think about what you were saying to yourself is, I was insecure, I was an imposter, I was worried I'd be found out. And so for you, it felt like a mess. And then it was just one moment where you decide, oh, that's actually what I can help people with, because I've just overcome all of that. Because for 30 years, I took this company from 5 million to 850 million. I was the customer care coordinator, and then I was executive vice president on departure. Now I'm running another company. Now I have a podcast. Now I have a daughter. Now I'm a grandma. You've done the hard stuff.
Well, James, I've been through even more hard stuff. I mean, when I think about it, like my goal to put my kids through college was because my mom and dad couldn't afford it. So I did pay for my daughter and my son to get through college, paid for it all myself. And then also I was single, and unfortunately, this is really pretty embarrassing, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, but maybe it can help someone. But I've actually been divorced many times, 4 times, and I just recently got remarried. So I want people to know that your past does not define your future, because I was single mom. I was traveling. That's why I didn't go back to college, because I knew I had to take care of my kids. And so, and unfortunately, the men in my life, I probably put my work first, and and they did not respond well to that, let's say, in a good way. And they were not, not in a Christian way. And so, for me, I had to make those choices, and I left a lot of bad relationships. But I also know that, God had someone more, wonderful for me, that's a Christian. And, and even the insecurities of like, do you ever get married again? Like, would you ever even do that? Most people in the world would say, my God, Melissa, like, you've been through these terrible relationships, and why would you ever do that again? Well, because we spent some really good premarital counseling with our pastor, and he literally changed our lives. Like, we were living a life of self, and he just said, you got, most marriages end up 50% end up in divorce, but not when they're based upon God. And so if you put your trust in your marriage and put God first, that's the only way that something could ever be successful. And so, we did that. We literally put God first, and we've been living together for 5 years, but we decided, okay, we're going to do this the right way. And so, James, I share that with you too, because I know that, with your podcast, you're trying to help people who are going through, a lot of challenges. This was a big challenge for me too. And I know that there are women out there that are going through some bad relationships. And I can promise you, like, with the right person, with the right Christian person, and putting God first, it can change everything for you.
Whoa, I got a lump in my throat listening to that one. It takes me back to before my wedding, going through planning sessions with the pastor, because he refused to marry us until we'd been doing the work. So I'll marry you, but we're going to do some work first. And Keith, a wonderful pastor in the UK, actually blessed us. And just this incredible experience to think about, how will you treat each other and how will you run your lives together? Have you asked yourself all of these questions? And they were deep, intimate, personal questions that I'd never asked myself. And I think that 50% divorce rate you bring up candidly comes down to bad planning, that there was no plan. And so, you connected with somebody, you think it's going to be forever, but actually you didn't plan forever. And what's going to happen when it goes badly wrong? How are you going to resolve that? And who are you going to look to outside of the marriage to actually help? I think it's wonderful. And I'm so super happy that you're finding yourself in a position of a loving marriage that had a little bit more thinking behind it and based upon faith and based upon your Christian belief system. I think that's really, really cool.
The other thing I think it did too is help. How do you get through conflict? And so when our pastors looked at each of us, they said, have you ever been through premarital counseling? And he had been married twice, and he said, we both looked at each other like, no. And so, I said, that must explain a lot. But for me, I think about too developing an emotionally healthy course, like an online course, so that people who aren't ready maybe to go to counseling or Christian counseling, that maybe they can watch a video and hear our story and hear how we were living. In the way that our pastor described it is like living for self or living for God. And when you're thinking about that in every single decision that you make, that means the world of it makes a world of difference. And how are you talking to one another? Our other pastor that moved to Maine, he said, you guys aren't really talking to each other like you love each other, like Christians. And so it was really getting out of our own way, and also overcoming all the insecurities that past relationships had brought. So to me, I'm really passionate about the fact that, in a way that I thought, I don't know if a pastor can help with this, but we really started putting God first. We pray together. We go to these church groups together, and it has helped us. And so many, he has 2 daughters by 2 different mothers. That creates certainly some challenges at times. And so, and I thought, why would God put me in this situation? But, it's been a real blessing, because I have a Christian husband, and he's putting me first. So it's God. So the way our pastor says, it's God, and then spouse, kids, and job. And anytime that these things are upside down, that's when we're not in alignment with God's plan for marriage. So if you're out there and you really need to, get in a good place with your marriage, I I highly recommend going to premarital counseling with your pastor.
Yeah, I love that. So I share that same model. So you're connecting to your higher self, and are you doing the good for humanity, or are you doing something for you? And there's a big difference between being self-centered and sabotaging your life, but then focusing on your spouse, your kids, your mission, whatever that is. So if you're a job or an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter as long as you have a personal and professional mission, which you now have. And I love it listening to your story. But another thing people get flipped up as well is putting the friends and family before all of that. And if you do that, you're going to miss up your mission. And so then you're going to become wondering, why didn't you achieve everything personally and professionally? Because you let people who weren't paying you make the decision. So your friends and family are really important for your community and your longevity and all those kind of cool things. But yeah, I go one step further and say, yeah, keep your friends and family below your mission. Be on your mission first. And if they are your mission, they're going to win. So they shouldn't be holding you back. But if you feel like they're inserting themselves into your life, yeah, just get your order right. I think you said it beautifully. Yeah. I
Yeah, I mean,
remember once. Yeah, I remember what I was saying. You made me think about Dr. Benjamin Hardy has written a book called Be Your Future Self Now. And in that book, he talks a little bit about the concept of, you said it earlier, was your past doesn't equal your present. He actually flips that completely. It says your present isn't defined by the past that you think you had. You didn't have the past you think you had. It's just a collection of memory and story, and it's frequently completely wrong. And so you've defined that here and now. But your future is actually you're living it now, how you define it. But if you don't define, if you think that the past equals your present, the present equals the future, then your future is going to be the same as everything you've experienced so far, because you haven't seen yourself with the faith to see things that haven't happened yet. But yeah, be who you want to be in your future. Start writing that down and defining it, and just be that person now. And I love that you kind of said that hidden in there. I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was really powerful, especially after you said the stuff about leaving the tribe and how the tribe kind of excommunicated you. And it was the members who weren't really in the central tribe, but were the ones reaching out saying, hey, I'd like to be
right.
you. Can I be in the new Melissa tribe? I'd like to be in that one because that sounds like fun to me. I don't want to be in the one that you left, the people who don't speak to you anymore. I want to be in the new one. Yeah, it was really good. The way you kind of explain all that really flows nicely for me. And I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Well, and I also think that a lot of people can get so tripped up on their past and also like can't see a way to the future. And I think that's where God's love really comes into play. And our pastor explains a lot like this. If you take your fit or your fist here and you turn it around and you say, this is our little finger, and this is who we are. We're made in God's image. We're not made in the image of a dog or a cat. Made in the image of God. And then this finger is really our bad news. And it's like, this is all the things that we've done wrong in our life. If we've sinned, if we've cheated or lied or stole or whatever it is, had anger. This is our bad news. But what our good news is that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for our sins. And that through God, he forgives us of all of our sin. And made a way to Jesus Christ, his one and only son. And that if we believe in him, and ask him to forgive us of our sins and come into our lives and be our Lord and Savior, then we're good with God. And so I love that whole way that he kind of uses his hand to really share the good news, is that we are not who we were in the past, and there is a hope for future. Like you can be a different person. And sometimes we get so tripped up in ourselves and think all the things we may have done wrong in our lives, and how would we ever be better? But God forgives, and he provides a way to be. I'm no longer the Melissa I was 30 years ago. You know what? And I'm not a perfect Melissa either, even though I'm a Christian. I have to do a little better every day. And we pray for forgiveness, and we pray for wisdom and courage and strength. And I just want to, share that with other people, that if they do think that, there's no hope, God gives us hope. God gives us hope for that someday that we're going to leave this world, and there's going to be something so much better for those who believe.
Maybe that's an awesome way to wrap up. I want to get you back on the show sometime, so we'll probably do that again. But what it makes me think of is the limitations people placing on themselves because they're asking, how can I? But the question's never about how, because that's a very limiting way for your brain to respond. The question's always normally, who can I connect to, and why might I do that? That reasons come first, results come second. But if you don't connect to the who, whoever that is for you, then it's going to be very difficult because you're going to ask, how can I get out of this situation a lot? How can I? But your brain doesn't know how. And so you do need to have a reason why and a who to be able to provide you with the information. And you can find that in your faith. And it sounds like you've definitely found that in your. Melissa, I want to thank you for your time today. I think it's awesome that we were have our first connection was this conversation. We had some time in the green room together, thinking about how we might talk in this conversation. I knew when we spoke that we were never going to get it done in one session. I'd love to have you back for part two. So maybe in a couple of months, we can hook you back up, get you back in here and dive deeper on some of the things we talked today, especially if there are things going on in your See the Unseen podcast world or things going on in the ventilation world around disabilities or helping people with sleep troubles and other things, so we could perhaps dive into some of those things as well. And if you are watching this and you've got comments on anything you've seen, ask questions. I'll answer them. If I don't answer them, Melissa will answer, but we'll get back in touch with you. But I would love you to reach out to Melissa. So I'm going to finish there. I want people to come and talk to you. I want them to be in your world because they want that connection. They don't want to be isolated. There were lots of things you said. Where can they find you? What's the best way to get to you?
So I have a Facebook page called See the Unseen with Melissa Georgeoff. And then I also have a YouTube channel. I'm on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but I would say go to my Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Or you can email me at melissa.georgeoff, and that's GeorGeoff @outlook.com. Thank you so much, James. I love being on your podcast. You're just a great person, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. All of what you just said, by the way, for the all in the show notes. I'm also going to write some blurb in here about what we've been talking about, so you can go down and see that. There'll also be chapters. So if you go to the chapters now and you didn't know where Melissa said something, I'm going to make it easy for you to go back and pick that up. So that would be great. Melissa, thank you very much. I can't wait to have you back.
Thanks, James. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for paying attention for this short video. I know there are tons of you out there who would like to get more information just like the video we just went through. So if you just click this link, I'll see you on the inside, rather giving you more tools, tips, strategies, and methodologies for you to level up in your career or your mission. I'll see you inside.